Listen to AM 560 The Answer online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, and on TuneIn, iHeart, and on Odyssey. America First with Sebastian Gorka, today at 3, right before Sean Thompson at 4 on AM 560 The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan, and in for Amy this morning is former ABC 7 political reporter Charles Thomas. We commit to uprooting the legacy and perpetuation of structural violence deeply embedded within the healthcare system. We recognize inequities built by past and present traumas rooted in white supremacy, colonialism, the gender binary, ableism, and all forms of oppression. That is not an oath you have to take to be part of the Brandon Johnson administration. That's an oath that you take at the University of Minnesota's medical school. We covered this story when the oath was revealed late last year, but it bears revisiting, not just because of our next guest's recent commentary on it, but also because of how we're seeing politicized medicine play out. Right, you immediately think COVID, but I immediately think, and we've spent so much time talking about it, quote-unquote gender-affirming care, which is a battleground issue in most of the states in this country at present, with just this week Indiana and Idaho becoming the 17th and 18th state to ban puberty blockers and mutilation of children. So it's real. We talked about the story out of Washington University, the St. Louis Children's Hospital in St. Louis, Washington University of St. Louis, and their trans health operation at St. Louis Children's Hospital, and the mom who felt like she was pressured by doctors to pursue these treatments for her son, who was having thoughts about he's a boy trapped in he's a girl trapped in a boy's body, and they put him on the puberty blockers, and that induced depression and anxiety, which is right there listed on the potential side effects, and even suicidal ideation. And she wanted it to stop. The doctors overruled her. It's not stopping their prescribed treatment for her son.
Yeah, it's frightening. This is so frightening when you think about politicized medicine, man, because who knows what we're going to be doing 50 years, 75, 100 years from now. I mean, didn't they used to drill holes in people's heads? Or they used leeches, they drilled holes in people's heads, they gave you electric shock treatment. All these, there's an evolution in medicine, and we have to be very careful.
Devolution.
Yeah, it can be a devolution as well as an evolution. But when we start saying this is right, this is what we need to do, that's frightening because.
Right. Do you want your kid's pediatrician or your heart surgeon to be focused on committing to uproot the legacy and perpetuation of structural violence deeply embedded within the healthcare system, or do you want them to know what they're doing when it comes to the practice of medicine? And I'm not saying the two are mutually exclusive, although the former is, just a statement of agitprop that could be applied in all sorts of different directions. And that's sort of the point. It gets you off mission, gets you off topic. Yeah. And so where does this go, as you're pointing out, Charles? So where are we? We've been on this path for a while. Some of us are just coming to terms with the fact that we're on this path. And it's getting narrower, that path. It's getting more dangerous, full of pitfalls, at least if you want to live in a free society. And to that end, just another data point here, a couple of academics writing up a piece. Boy, who could see this coming? Anybody who was paying attention. All these DIE officers and offices on college campus, diversity, inclusion, equity. Yeah. According to a recent study by the free speech watchdog organization Speech First, 56% of American universities have adopted schemes that encourage students to report on one another anonymously for quote-unquote bias or quote-unquote protected identity harm. So anyone who falls short of campus orthodoxy on pronouns, transgenderism, microaggressions, prescribed language could soon be denounced and deprived of basic due process. We've seen this. We've talked about specific cases, specific instances of exactly that. And the number of universities that have now married Dye with a Stasi culture on campus has doubled in the last 6 years.
You can be investigated because you may have said something. You can be under investigation.
You can be gone.
Right.
You can be expelled. The punish, and not to mention the public, publicly crucified, as we're on this Good Friday.
You
All
know
right.
what I ask a lot of my friends who would support a lot of my lefty friends. I said, what is the end game here? What do you guys? Is this to go on perpetuity forever? Are we going to be talking about this? Do you ever have an ideal? Is there going to be a time when when, for instance, race is not an issue? What's the end game here?
And what do they
we lost
say?
sight of it? They really don't. They don't have an answer for that.
Yeah,
They do not have an answer. But when you ask the question, it's provocative enough to make them think at least.
Well, they're the useful idiots that dictators from throughout the annals of history have relied on. They just indulge their own sentimentality, and they have no consideration for the implications. They have no consideration for the path this puts civilization on. For more on this, pleased to be joined by Theodore Dalrymple, contributing editor at City Journal, senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute, the author of many books, including Life at the Bottom, Romancing Opiates, Pharmacological Lies, and the Addiction Bureaucracy. Theodore Dalrymple, thanks so much for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you for asking me.
So you took up the Minnesota med school oath that I just referenced, and you offered this line: "We have seen the future, and it is unfreedom." Explain.
Well, what's happening, perhaps one of the most important things about that particular oath is that it forces people who don't believe in it actually to take it. I don't believe that most of the medical students, or perhaps only half of the medical students, doesn't matter what proportion, actually believe in the truth of it. But they take the oath anyway because they have to. I mean, they either take it or they cease to be medical students. And this destroys their probity. It destroys their locus standi, the point from which they can oppose anything. And the point of this is to give bureaucrats and administrators total power over them. And I've seen it. I've seen it in minor ways in my own practice in England, and this means that everyone is now living in fear of being, as you pointed out, spied upon. You are now, if you take an oath like that, you're a hostage to fortune. Everyone knows really that no one means it. After all, they say they acknowledge that the land on which the medical school is built, I think it was belonged to the Dakota Indians. Well, they're not. I mean, everyone knows that if a posse of Dakota Indians comes and says, well, we want to take over the land, no one is going to give it to them. So the whole thing is a lie, and everyone knows it's a lie, and yet they are forced to subscribe to it. And that is what I saw in the communist world before the end of communism. Everyone had to subscribe to what they knew was not true.
It's the
no greater psychological violence to people than that.
Right. It's the old line from the Stalin era, which is, "Don't be the first one who stops clapping."
Yeah. In fact, it was dangerous to be the first one to stop clapping.
Right, and And so, I mean, especially since you are a medical doctor, I mean, what does that say, just even narrowly in terms of your profession? What does that say about the future of medicine in the West?
Well, it means that actually administrators and politicians and so on will be deciding what is good, what is necessary, what is forbidden, and so on. I mean, I had a small experience of this. The Irish State Television asked me to come on to a television program there to say that all this transgenderism wasn't a great triumph for humanity or for liberty or anything, actually, because they said they couldn't find anybody who was willing to come on and say that. They found plenty of people who thought that it was all a disaster, including professors and many, many doctors, but they couldn't find one who was prepared to come out into the open and say what they thought. Well, this is the kind of terror that we are now living under.
And so, I mean, and there's other illustrations of that too. That's a good one. But I mean, I mentioned at the top too this story that was covered out of St. Louis. Mom says, "This treatment isn't working. I don't want my kid on this medication anymore." Doctors say, "Well, no, he's staying on the medication." I mean, I guess, I'm just trying to think about the last dozen years when we went from Barack Obama's "if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor," to where we are now. If you don't like your doctor's opinion, I mean, I don't even know what the aphorism would be, but I mean, it's just wild that we at least used to give the idea, even with the backdoor takeover of the healthcare system with Obamacare, that patient choice and patient empowerment was something that was sacrosanct. And now we're to the point where it's just open and naked that, look, you can have your opinion, but this is our show.
Well, I think it's actually all a conspiracy by malpractice lawyers, because it's all going to end up in the courts, and there's going to be billions and billions involved, because eventually I think the worm will turn, and then everyone will say how monstrous all this has been, and people will be sued enormously. Already in England, actually, there's a case. There's Tavistock Clinic, which was very enthusiastic about the prescription of puberty blockers. Will possibly be a class action of 1,000 people against the Tavistock Clinic. Of course, since the Tavistock Clinic is a state institution, it's the taxpayer who will pay for everything. But nevertheless, this is an illustration of where it will go in the end, or before very long, actually, I think.
Because you've written, and we've talked on this before, but we just had a mayoral election in Chicago, and you had somebody who was
I must congratulate you on your new mayor.
Thank you so much. You have our new mayor is someone, as you may know, who previously, and I think currently, but he muted it a bit during the campaign, was a proponent of defunding the police, social workers to respond to quote unquote, domestic calls, nonviolent calls, quotations. So the philosophy, and yes. I wonder how you would explain, just given your experience working in prisons, how you would explain. Maybe are there general things we should understand about the mindset of the habitual violent offender that we should understand that should inform the way we go about trying to deal with the habitual violent offender?
Well, I mean, the fundamental misunderstanding, I think, is that there's a difference between primary and secondary prevention. What your mayor will say, I dare say, that we should understand the root causes of crime and get to the root causes of crime, and then there will be no criminals, which is preposterous. But there's the secondary prevention, and that's what you do with people once they have become criminal. And that's the situation that we are dealing with. And once they have become criminal, then they, like everybody else, make calculations. They're human beings. They make calculations, and in some, I mean, there are of course some who are beyond any form of any kind of real thought. There are some, but not many, and they make calculations as to whether they will get away with things, and if they will get away with things, they're more likely to do them. And there are some people who probably by temperament are more inclined to be violent and aggressive than others, but even they make some kind of assessment of the likely outcome of what they're doing. They are not automata, they are human beings. That's the important thing to remember. So they are like you and me. They make bad calculations, they do bad things, but they do make calculations, and therefore, if they are made to pay for what they do, they are less likely to do it in the first place.
He is Theodore Dalrymple, contributing editor to City Journal, senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute, and the author of books including Life at the Bottom and Romancing Opiates, Pharmacological Lies and the Addiction Bureaucracy. Theodore Dalrymple, thanks as always for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And he joined us on the Turnkey.Pro answer line.
There's only one radio show in Chicago talking about today's biggest stories and telling you what they really mean. That show is this one, Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, The Answer.
You've heard Rumpke's Garage commercials on AM 560, and now they specialize in servicing Sprinters and light-duty diesels. But the experts at Rumpke's also service Isuzu and Chevy low cab forward